Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Pokemon trading card game online. I am Atyrum, and before we get started today, I'd like to give a little bit of an introduction as to what kind of series this is going to be. What I'm going to be doing basically is showcasing decks that I do a lot of battling with in this game, and also showing them in action. And I don't by any means consider myself an expert at this game. I mean, I'm okay enough, but so there will be some more competitive decks that you might see at a tournament, but I'll also be playing a lot of, goofy decks, stuff that, probably only works about 25% of the time, but, I'll show those rare instances where those goofy decks do work. So, yeah, that's the kind of stuff you can look forward to from this series. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the first deck showcase. I'm going to be showing off my Charizard and Entei deck, although I suppose I shouldn't really claim credit for this deck because I kind of copied the list off the internet and then I kind of made a couple tweaks of my own, I believe. But yeah, I mean, that's basically how I usually do these kinds of things. When I want to build a competitive deck, I usually refer to a list online and basically copy the deck card for card, try it out a couple times, see if it suits, what I'm going for, and then change it up based on, well, first of all, depending on what cards I have, and also depending on how I think it works and what I think could improve with my personal playstyle. So, without further ado, let's get into looking at this deck, explaining how it works. The star of this deck is, of course, Charizard-EX right here from Flash Fire. This is the one with the attack Combustion Blast. Don't confuse it with the other one that I believe has the attack Fire Blast, because that one just isn't as good. This one, of course, good because Combustion Blast does 150 damage. Add on 20 damage with a Muscle Band. Let's go look at Muscle Band real quick. Or with Giovanni's Scheme, and you can hit 170 damage, which is enough to knock out about half of the EX Pokemon out there. Or, of course, you can combine the Muscle Band and the Giovanni's Scheme and hit 190, or you can use a Fighting Fury Belt, which has 10 damage to do 160, plus Giovanni's Scheme to do 180, and hit that 180 damage that most EX Pokemon need to knock them out. And also in this deck is the basic Pokemon Entei from Ancient Origins with 130 health. This card is definitely also good because of the Heat Tackle attack, which does 130 damage. Do note the Ancient trait, I believe that's Theta? Is that Theta? I don't even know. Double, which allows this Entei to have two tool cards attached to it. So you can go and attach 2 Muscle Bands, getting that Heat Tackle up to 170 damage. Or, of course, you can add 2 Fighting Fury Belts, which add 40 HP each, which means Entei is going to be at a whopping 210 HP. That's about as much as a Mega EX. Not too shabby. Of course, you'll be doing 150 damage, and you can add, of course, as always, Giovanni's Scheme to that to do 20 more, hit that magic 170 to knock out a good number of EX Pokemon. Of course, also in the Pokemon lineup is Shaman EX. Always a good card to have for just making your deck fast enough to get going. Its setup ability is basically invaluable. You really cannot run a competitive deck without Shaman. Alright, so getting into the trainer cards, of course we have Acrobike, which will help us draw through our deck faster and hopefully get some fire energy in the discard pile for use with Blacksmith, which I'll get to in a moment. We got Battle Compressor, also used for getting these fire energy into the discard pile and to use with Blacksmith. And Professor's Letter to get some energy in my hand when I need it. Switch, of course, to get myself out of sticky situations. I never really run decks without Switch. I find it's another invaluable card that you really cannot go without unless you have other methods with which to switch your Pokemon out of the active. And even then, I usually try and run at least one of these. Of course, I got 4 Trainer's Mail, which let me burn through my deck faster, gets me the trainer cards I need to. 3 Ultra Balls. I usually run 4. I think maybe the deck that I looked at online ran only 3, so I figured they'd be okay. 4 Versus Seekers, of course, because that is also another card that you really cannot go without, because it lets you pull a supporter from your discard pile, either one that you discarded or one that you used already, and basically a really good card. You cannot go without that card. Blacksmith is of course the core of this deck because it allows you to attach 2 fire energy to one of your fire type Pokemon on top of the normal energy attachments for one turn. So basically what you can do is you can get your Charizard, which takes 2 fire and 2 colorless, or your Entei, which has the same requirement, and get them powered up in one turn. And here's how. Battle Compressor, discard a Blacksmith and 2 Fire Energy. Then you use Versus Seeker to pull out the Blacksmith, and then attach 2 Fire Energy to your Charizard or Entei, and then attach a double Colorless. You can now hit for 150 or more depending on how many tool cards you have and whether or not you have Giovanni's Scheme, which of course you can't play the same turn you play Blacksmith because you can only play one supporter per turn, but you do have your attacker all set up in the first turn. That's of course if you get lucky with cards. That's of course why we have all these cards to help us get through our deck. Of course we have Lysander as well, which is another important supporter. You cannot go without that. I believe I talked about Giovanni's Scheme enough. It can also be used as a draw supporter if you absolutely need it to. Usually that's one of the cards I tend to discard with Battle Compressor. That way I can Versus Seeker it out later rather than drawing it when I don't need it. Professor Sycamore is also a very important card. I only run one of them in this deck because I believe the deck list I found online only had one of them, and I find the deck runs well enough with only one. Most of my decks I tend to have 3 or 4, and also 3 or 4 of either Shauna or Birch's observations. And of course N is now in standard again, so you do run those as well. Scorched Earth is a really important stadium in this deck because it allows you to discard Fire Energy, which of course you can bring back with Blacksmith. And then it lets you draw 2 additional cards, which is of course very important in getting your deck all set up properly. Fighting Fury Belt is of course an important tool card. It can only be attached to basic Pokemon. It adds 40 HP and 10 damage. Of course, if you add just 10 damage to a Charizard-EX's Combustion Blast, that's not enough to knock out most EXs. I think there's a couple, Florges EX and Alakazam EX come to mind, who only have 160 health. But for the majority of time, you are going to attach the Fighting Fury Belt to your Enteis and try and buff their health. And that's about it for the deck. So I am going to go into a couple showcase matches. I sometimes have a hard time getting matches that are really worthy of being shown on camera. So the first 2 matches are kind of, really quick matches. I mean, like first or second turn knockouts to the win. And I just kind of wanted to show off how fast it is, how easy it is, how fast to get either Charizard or Entei set up. And then of course there's a later match that's much longer and much more interesting. So I hope you stay tuned for that and enjoy. Alright, so let's jump right in with our first match here. I'm going to be speeding up these matches by about 1.5 times speed, and I'm also going to be post-commentating them because, well, the thing is, it can be hard to find a good match, and I figured it would be better to record every match I do with this deck until I get a couple of good ones and just delete all the extra footage that I don't need, and then I can post-commentate over it rather than wasting my time commentating over a bunch of matches that end up being duds. Actually, to be honest though, the first couple matches here are kind of duds. I do get an early knockout on my opponent's first Pokemon in both these games, but I wanted to show off how quickly the Charizard and Entei deck gets set up. So, looks like my opponent has a Carbink. I don't think I realized what it was right away, because I started getting my Charizard all set. Actually, I think I probably threw the Muscle Band down there. Because I was going to end up discarding my hand anyway. So I'm going to throw a Fighting Fury Belt down on my Entei and throw the double Colorless. I have the Blacksmith and 2 Energy in my discard pile, all ready to get my Entei powered up next turn. Looks like I'm going to go for a Trainer's Mail, get lucky with a switch, so I can get my Charizard out of the active. Of course, Carbink has a Safeguard ability, which prevents EX Pokemon from attacking it, which means I'm going to need to get my Entei powered up. Made a little bit of a misplay here because I already played a supporter for the turn, but I still ended up Versus Seekering for the Blacksmith. Usually I don't like to do that. I prefer to keep the Versus Seeker in my hand when possible so that my opponent doesn't know what I'm planning on doing next turn. Because if I say Versus Seeker for a Lysander out of my discard pile and I can't play it that turn, then my opponent knows, well, hey, I probably shouldn't put anything on my bench that could be Lysander out, or I should probably play around that somehow. I just like to make sure my opponent has as little information as possible about what's in my hand. Of course, if you're in a situation where you're going to be item locked, of course you want to get that Versus Seeker out. But, of course, that's not the situation I'm in here. And then my opponent's going to end up attaching an Energy and a Muscle Band, and just ending their turn. I guess they don't have any item cards, any Ultra Balls or Level Balls or anything. I mean, nothing. So, get an easy knockout here on the Carbink and win that game right there. Alright, so let's go ahead and hop into another game here. As I said before, this is going to be another quick game because I did want to show off how quick the deck is, and I didn't get a whole lot of good games in here. The last game is pretty good, pretty long, more difficult game. So we're going to start with a Charizard and an Entei, which is a great start, and of course I have Acrobike and Trainer's Mail to possibly get me out and get me some draw support and whatever I need. My opponent, again, plays only one Pokemon, which is a Phantump, which would be scary in a normal situation. They also have Esper, which is kind of weird, because Phantump does evolve into Trevenant, which will lock down your item cards. And of course, my deck does rely fairly heavily on item cards, but luckily my opponent chose to go first this game, which means they can't get off their Ascension attack, which would let them evolve into Trevenant right away. And so basically, I am going to use my item cards this turn, which is good because I don't have any draw supporters. So I'm going to go ahead and Trainer's Mail for that Scorched Earth, and which I will then use to discard a Fire Energy and draw 2 extra cards. I'm basically searching for that Battle Compressor, which I do end up getting, so that I can discard 2 Fire Energy and a Blacksmith. And of course, I already have the VS Seeker in my hand, so all I need to do is play down a Fire Energy versus Seeker for Blacksmith, and then put those 2 Fire Energy on my Charizard, and win the game. It's as simple as that. Alright, and here's our last game for the day, which is going to be a much more interesting game. My opponent actually has, as you can see by the Rough Seas Stadium, a Water-type deck, which, of course, coming up against my Charizard Entei deck, it's a very bad matchup. And then there you can see that they have a Greninja Break deck, which is it's normally a very scary deck to go up against, and doubly so considering that I'm weak to water, and he can basically knock out most of my Pokemon in one hit if he gets a Muscle Band down, which is definitely a scary thing to think about. So I do start with one Entei here, and of course I have a double Colorless play down on it, and Sycamore, and Battle Compressor, so I'm going to get set up pretty good here on my first turn. While I'm just waiting for my opponent to pick their active Pokemon. And of course, this is why I speed up the games, because sometimes it can take a while for somebody to pick their choice, their move they're going to make for their turn. And sometimes I take a little while too, but usually I'm pretty quick about it, because I like to get through games quickly, and yeah. So, go ahead and start with my Entei, of course, because that's the only thing I have. My opponent probably, yep, he has a Froakie. So I'm going to go ahead and Battle Compress, get those 2 Fire Energy and that 1 Blacksmith in my discard pile, ready to use. And I believe I'm actually going to go for that my first turn, because I would have normally gone for Sycamore, just to get a fresh hand, but I do have that Shaman there, so I'm not as worried about needing to get a fresh hand, because, Greninja deck is not that fast to set up, so I wouldn't be worried about a first turn knockout. The most I'm worried about is him paralyzing me with a bubble attack, which would mean I don't get an attack next turn. But for now, I'm going to throw my 2 Fighting Fury Belts down in the Entei, which is going to give it a total of 210 HP, which matches some Mega EX Pokemon, and also guarantees that if he gets a Greninja Breakout and just goes for the attack without the extra ability damage, that he will not be able to knock me out, even with a Muscle Band, which is nice. But, of course, Greninja is known for its ability, which allows my opponent to discard a Water Energy from his hand and do damage to any Pokemon he wants on my side of the field. Greninja, the regular Greninja from XY base set, which some people play, some people don't, can do 30 with a discarded water, while Greninja Break will do 60, which is scary because that's a two-hit knockout on Shaman. So of course here he comes out with a Frogadier. He's going to go ahead and get his water duplicates set up, which means that he's going to have 3 Frogadiers on his bench. I'm probably going to be able to knock out, well, obviously I am going to be able to knock out his Frogadier in the active spot, but of course next turn he has 3 Frogadiers that were played down last turn, which means he can evolve all of those if he wants to. So there's a potential for me to be coming up against 3 Greninjas. And luckily, Entei does do the perfect 130 damage to knock out a Greninja in one hit, but unfortunately they are also going to be able to knock me out in one hit. I am up on the prize trade right now because I have knocked out, at the end of this turn, I'll have knocked out 2 Pokemon. Of course, also kind of a shame that I'm going to be taking damage from Heat Tackle when I flip Tails. I had thought about running Trick Coin in this deck, but I just feel like it's not worth it. I'd rather go for the maximum damage output. So we go ahead and knock out his Frogadier. He's got 3 more left. He's going to go ahead and evolve that into Greninja. I have 180 health left, which means if he uses his Moonlight Slash attack with a Muscle Band attached, he will knock me out, and all I'll have left is Shaymins. Last turn I did play down a double colorless energy on my Shaymin, because I do want to be able to attack with that if I need to put it back in my hand for any reason. Of course, that Shaymin is either going to be a target or not a target, depending on whether or not he sees that strategy as putting it back in my hand. I mean, I guess it's a pretty obvious play, but he may try and knock it out before I can do that. So he was going to pull out a Remoraid, which of course evolves into Octillery, which is the primary draw support for a Greninja deck. It looks like he didn't draw any energy, so I'll be getting another knockout here. And I did end up drawing into another Entei there with my Scorched Earth Stadium. Go ahead and Acrobike for a switch in case I need it. And then VS Seeker for that Lysander, okay. And then I'm going to Lysander out the Greninja to knock it out. This is a little bit of a misplay on my part. I probably should have realized that he doesn't have any energy in his hand, and it seems like he doesn't have any other draw supporters of any kind, possibly. But he did end up getting that Octillery out. I probably should have knocked out the Remoraid, because then he wouldn't be able to draw it into this new hand. And I believe he got these cards that he needs now from those cards he just drew. So if I had knocked out that Remoraid, I would have severely slowed him down and made this game a little bit easier. But as it is, he did end up getting a Sycamore. Again, I have no way of knowing if that was in his hand already or not. But there is all this possibility. In the future, I should probably aim for that Remoraid when I'm in a similar situation. So he is going to go ahead and pull another Greninja. And he's got the Greninja Break out front, which is a scary Pokemon to come up against. It has 170 HP. Of course, its ability, as we've gone over before, it can do 60 to any one of my Pokemon. Plus, he can do 80 damage times 2 for weakness, knocking out my Entei in one hit. So that's definitely a scary thing to come up against. It also, because of the high HP count combined with the Rough Seas Stadium, it's going to be hard to knock it out without getting it in one hit, which I cannot do with my Entei. And of course, once I do knock it out, I'm only going to get one prize for it because it is a break Pokemon rather than an EX Pokemon. Alright, so we're going to knock his Stadium out of there, and then I believe I'm going to go for I'm going to go for Blacksmith and get my Entei powered up because I feel like I should at least get some attacks in. Of course, I can't knock it out in one hit unless I had 2 Muscle Bands, which I do not have at this point in time. Of course, since I went for the Blacksmith, I could not go for a Sycamore. I could not draw any more cards. I believe I might have one more Shaymin in my deck I possibly could have used in that situation, but I did want to hang on to my hand in case I needed some of those cards. I did want to make sure I could knock out his Stadium when I needed to, because I didn't want him to have that healing capability. And of course, I can do 30 with my Shaymin, but that's not quite enough to knock out the Greninja Break at this point. It would leave me 10 short. And after he knocks out my Entei, I'm not going to have a Pokemon, but I can use my Ultra Ball to get something out. Alright, he's getting another Octillery set up, so even if we knock out that Octillery he has, he's still going to have his draw support. And he does have another Greninja Break, which is definitely a scary thing, because until I get my Charizard set up, I cannot knock those out in one hit. Alright, and I believe next turn, after he knocks out my Entei, which he will do, and he's second here. Luckily, he doesn't have much of a hand size, so he doesn't have the water energy in his hand required to really hit my bench, because if he really wanted to, because Greninja has free retreat, he could do his ability, discard a water energy, do 60 to a Shaymin, and then retreat into the other one and do the exact same thing, and that'd be a knockout on a Shaymin. Luckily, he does not do that because he doesn't have the water energy in his hand required to do that. I'm going to go ahead and grab my Charizard and play that down, and we just go for the Sycamore because I need some more cards in my hand. I need to find some of the stuff I need. Looks like I'm going to go ahead and play the Acrobike, and I find a Fighting Fury Belt, which is perfect, actually, because I can go ahead and throw that down on my Shaymin, which gives me a 10 damage boost, which is just enough to knock out that Greninja Break, and also put the Shaymin back in my hand. At which point, of course, I'm going to take my prize card, and then go ahead and promote my other Shaymin. And I do this because I know that he can't knock out my Shaymin in one hit, because even with a Muscle Band, Greninja is doing 100 damage, which is just shy of knocking it out. Of course, he could have a Giovanni's Scheme Muscle Band combo, but I found that very, very unlikely. I mean, a lot of Greninja decks I don't think run Giovanni's Scheme, so I wasn't too worried about that. I knew he wouldn't be able to knock out my Shaman in one hit, and I knew next turn I'd be able to pull something off and switch into my Charizard and hopefully get some kind of attack off. Of course, the two Shamans in my hand are kind of dead weight at this point in time because I have too many cards in my hand. And the Giovanni's Scheme is not all that useful unless I can get a Muscle Band. Or actually, no, I can get, if I do get the energy I need on my Charizard, I can knock out the Greninja Break. But of course, he has another one waiting. And of course, I won't be getting rid of any energy by knocking it out because his attack causes the energy to go back into his hand. So, this is definitely a bit of a situation that I've gotten myself into here. Again, I feel like I could have severely slowed him down if I had knocked out that Remoraid in the first place before it evolved into Octillery. And he's going to go ahead and go for the attack, which is obviously not going to knock out my Shaman. And then we're going to my turn after this, after he attacks. And he's second now. He's going to go for a Sycamore first. And as you'll notice, we're both really low on cards at this point in time. And that's when I start thinking that maybe trying to deck him out might be a legitimate strategy here because I'm definitely running out of stuff, and he's going to go for the attack, the ability on my Charizard to try and knock down an 8 HP. So at this point, even with a Fighting Fury belt attached, I would still be at low enough health that he'd be able to knock me out in one hit, taking 2 prize cards, and of course I got nothing else set up. He's going for another attack, another ability with his other Greninja to hit my Charizard on the bench, trying to build up some damage there. If I wait one more turn, he'd be able to knock it out without actually attacking it. So he's all set up for the win next turn, possibly, because next turn, if he has the water energy in his hand, he could knock out my Charizard on the bench and then kill him, finish off my Shaman, which is definitely a bad situation to be in. But I'm going to play risky play. I'm going to go for the Lysander on his Octillery. I suppose it's not really risky play, but I was counting on the fact that he didn't have a switch in his deck, because he did play that off Floatstone already. I don't remember if he has another one in his discard pile, but I know he's running out of cards, and the best chance I have is to try and deck him out. He's still got to take 4 more prize cards, so I promote the Entei, knowing that he will only take 1 prize card if he does end up killing that. Here I go looking at his discard pile, seeing if he has another Floatstone in there. I know Greninja decks tend to not play switches because either they have the Floatstone on their Artillery or they have free retreat on the Greninja, and there you go. He surrendered because he had no other way out of that situation. So, interesting game. I mean, definitely a tough matchup to go against, but I think I handled it all right. I mean, there are a couple misplays there, and I think I've said this. I may have said this before. I'm definitely not an expert player. I mean, I do my best, and I mean, I don't know. I've never been to a tournament or anything like that, but I mean, I do my best. I try to get the win, and you know, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Alright, well, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you're looking forward to more videos on the Pokemon trading card game online. See you guys next time.